am. Sorry about that. For some reason, it was saying host will not let you in. And I was like, oh no. Oh, did you get that too? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Like, we're not allowed in. How did we get kicked out of our own event?
Oh, it figures, doesn't it?
Awesome. So first off, so I want to welcome everyone here. I'm gonna try to turn my stuff off. There we go. I want to welcome everyone here. Thank you for coming on a Thursday night to hang out with me and Brooke. And I want to welcome the magnificent Brooke Shaden, who I have adored for like literally I don't even know how many years. Brooke is a fine arts photographer. She is an author. She is an educator. She is the co-host of the web show, The Concept. She is absolutely amazing. And her latest book, Reflection, is so good, so good, so good. I'm going to, just in case you haven't like actually seen it, I'm just going to show y'all for a second before we start talking, just so you have an idea of it. Is big and beautiful and glossy and lovely. You know, sometimes you get a photography book and it doesn't capture the actual image in the way that you remember it. And this is absolutely, like, every page is perfect and beautiful and lovely. And I will go ahead and, just for housekeeping, because otherwise I'm going to forget. Let's see. So you do, your ticket here gets you a $5 coupon off of the book. If you have any questions using the coupon, because that's the first time that we've ever done this, just email orders@nowherebookshop.com and we will help you out. So Brooke and I are going to be talking for a while, and then in the end, we're going to do Q&A. So if you have questions, if you go down to the bottom where it says like participants chat, share screen, well, hopefully you don't have share screen because then we'd be in big trouble. Q&A. So if you click on Q&A, you can leave your questions there, and then at the end, I will open it up and we can answer questions. So, all that to say, welcome, Brooke.
Thank you so much. It's like, it's a dream come true to be sitting here with you. And I can't believe that we met each other, like, I don't even know how long ago now, 7 years ago.
It's gotta be, yeah.
I don't even know, but it's been such a joy just to witness you every single day, being exactly who you are and watching people love you for it. And I'm just so grateful that you exist, because I think everybody needs a little bit more Jenny in their lives.
Well, ditto, because that really, the way that I found you was on the internet, and I would look at these amazing photographs, and so often I could see myself in the photographs, and I, would just be like, I mean, it was like taking my heart out. I was like, I felt seen in some ways. So I wanted to talk, there's a lot of things that I want to talk about, but one of the things that I wanted to talk about was, so what was your like biggest hope when it came to this book coming out?
It's the same thing that I hope for when I started photography, which is that when I create an image, it's only 50% for me and it's 50% for other people. And I think that a lot of artists kind of disagree with this from a very fundamental standpoint of like, if you're gonna create work, it has to be for you. And then other people may like it or they may view it. And I just always see it as 50-50. So when I started my journey in photography, I very much wanted to start conversations and make people feel seen and accepted, and to let this be about us and not me. And so when this opportunity came about to put a book together of my work, I just felt like this, like, what a great way to continue the celebration of what art can be for people. You know, I hope that people look at this book and say, maybe I could do something like that. Or I've seen this and now I feel like I'm connected, or like somebody gets it. And that's all I really want. You know, it's not like, it doesn't stop when I make the image or even when I release it. It's the process of creating art or creating a book or anything is the process of continually getting the feedback of what it means to somebody else, I think. And that's why I love doing this.
So it's like a circle almost.
Yeah, completely. It just keeps feeding it. And then, you know, the more feedback I get, negative or positive or transformative or whatever, it's like I get to put that into my next piece of art and then get that feedback and then bring it back. And that's how art evolves. And that's where I think artists tend to get scared of the creating process, because it's scary to get that feedback. You know, like I mean, like right before we jumped on today, I was just reading a message somebody sent me saying, you know, your art is satanic and I hate this. And like, you know, it was like really, really intense. And I was like, oh, okay. But like, that's a relevant conversation too. So I hope that when people look at this book, you know, there's no way that they're going to flip open to every page and think, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Because it's not meant to be. But that's the joy of it, right? Is like getting to hear from people who think that I'm like literally the devil, and then other people who think that it's the opposite, and that's cool.
Well, you know, they always say that, you know, the real measure of art is if it brings out emotion. So if people are like emotional enough to be like, you're Satan, you win. I mean,
Exactly.
So how do you handle, because I mean, I know how I handle, you know, negative reactions when it comes to writing, but it seems like it would be so different when it comes to photography, because it is so all about like what the person themselves, like what they're sort of bringing to it. So how do you deal with negative, positive, all of that?
It's interesting. You brought that up perfectly, because I was just thinking how when people react to my writing, you know, a caption that I might write or a blog post, when there's a negative reaction to that, it's so much more personal than when it's to my art. Like when it's to my art, I don't even feel like I'm part of it. I'm like, okay, that's great. You're over there feeling that way about that thing that I put over there, but like I'm over here and it's okay. But when it's about something that I've written or an opinion that I've expressed, then it's harder to unravel yourself from it, which, you know, you writing at least, you know, in part about your own life has to be so much harder than just like, I made a thing, now I'm gonna put it on that wall and they can go talk about it over there. It's like, you know, because my art is really not very autobiographical. It is sometimes, but pretty rarely. So for me, it's totally separated. It's just not a real thing. But on the flip side, I think it's really valuable to take in those negative comments and to train yourself to say that's a valid opinion too, which we're very much not trained to do in this climate, especially in the United States, where we're very much like, well, if they think that, they're wrong. But I don't think that they are. Like, you know, this message that I got today, if somebody thinks that my art is like born of the devil, then like they're entitled to think that, and I can't say that they're wrong. Like, what? Oh, I don't know where it comes from. Goodness gracious. But I do think it's really healthy to just say that's a negative opinion, and it's valid, and that's a positive opinion, and that's valid. And I think that artists tend to they're not able to do one or the other. You know, some people are like, take the negative and they're like, oh, I bet they're right. I bet my art is terrible. And then they see the positive and say, oh, they're just lying to me. My art isn't any good. And then some people do the opposite, where it's like, give me the praise. But if you say something bad, you're probably wrong. You know, I just try to be equal about it. Not that I won't like complain to my husband when I get a negative message and be like, oh, I can't believe they said that. But, you know, it's all about balance, I think.
Yeah. No, I am 100% with you, and exactly the same about, I will call my husband and be like, can you believe they said that? And then I'll be like, but also it's really valid, and they
right.
right, and damn it, that's what makes it worse. Like if they're totally wrong, then I'm like, whatever, idiot, you read that wrong. But then sometimes I'm like, oh, it could be taken to, okay, Okay, damn it. All right. We open that. So yeah.
I know. I've been doing this lately. I think it actually took a lot of years for me to be able to look at the comments that have some truth ringing in them, but that I didn't like, and to be able to recognize the truth in it. You know, so often it's just like, oh, that I sense a negative opinion coming, shut it down. I don't care what they say. They're going to be wrong. And, but lately it's been really interesting. And I'm thinking specifically, a couple days ago, I was sharing about this dead bird that I found and how beautiful I thought it was. And immediately I get these messages like, this is immoral. You can't photograph dead things. And I thought, they're stupid. That's not a valid opinion. And then I thought, well, wait, like that is a very interesting opinion. And I started having conversations, and not that my opinion was changed on the matter, but it did open my eyes to like, well, that's a valid way of seeing the world. And that's why it's so cool, I think, to create art that is meant to allow other people to step into it, which is someone else might bring their trauma or their joy or whatever experience they have into the image that I've made of myself largely. And that's okay. And that can change the meaning of the picture as time goes on. So that's pretty cool.
It's interesting that you say that, because so some of my very favorite photographs that you've done that really just like touched me in like just a physical, like achy sort of way are a lot of the ones that you did where you did like the sort of underwater ones, but you're not really, it looks like you're not really underwater, but really you are. And that those were sort of some of the first ones that I found of yours. And I remember when I saw them, I was like, oh, she's just like me. Like I can totally tell, like, I bet she has depression. I bet she has this. I bet she has anxiety. I bet. And I was taking all this stuff and like just putting it on you. And then when I met you, I was like, she's so happy. I mean, people say the same thing about me, but still, it's interesting how easy it is for, like, I look at that and I'm like, this is exactly how I feel when I'm in a depression. I feel like I'm underwater, I'm in this stasis and I can't move. And then other people look at that exact same image and go, oh, that is such an image of like joy and everything's uplifted and there's no gravity. And I love that, that every time I look at your stuff, one of my favorite things to do is to discuss it with other people, to be like, okay, this is what this feels like to me. And this is what this reminds me of this story, and how they will have a completely different take, which is so amazing.
It's, I've never experienced that more thoroughly than when I take my images into drastically different cultures from mine. And specifically, one of the most jarring experiences was that I do some nonprofit work in Greece where I work with refugees. And I had my images up on a computer and we were just kind of cycling through them, and everyone in the class, it was a bunch of teenagers, and we were all saying like, what does this one make you feel? What does this make you think of? And it was like almost consistently every image that I thought were like my happiest images that I had intentionally chose to show, they always thought that it was like the scariest, most upsetting picture that I was showing. And I was like, so I remember pulling one up and it was an image where I was sort of like painting a sunset into the sky. And I was like, what does this one make you feel? Thinking this is the happiest picture I've ever made. And they were like, oh, it makes me think of when my city was bombed and it makes me think of death. And I was like, oh my gosh, like these are things that I'm not thinking of when I'm making this picture, but it's no less valid. And totally changed how I see that image now. And that's like, oh, I just get goosebumps thinking about all these different opinions that I've been told about my work and how that people see it. Because now I look at my work differently. Like now I look at that image and I'm like, what a sad image I made, even though I thought it was really happy at first.
I love that. I love the idea, not only of the other people, but I never even thought about that, of other cultures seeing it in different ways. But yeah, that totally makes sense. Have there ever been any images that you made and then later you regretted them or thought, oh, that's not what I really want to be out there?
A little bit, but the interesting thing about that is that I look back, like I cringe at images, you know, there are images that I made. And I bet that somebody watching this will totally understand me when I say the stick head image. I've made images that are just terrible from a conceptual standpoint, from a technical standpoint. And those I love the most. Like those are like, oh, I just look back at these images like, what was I thinking? But then like the answer to that is I was trying really hard, you know? And now I see that it was absurd. It was just ridiculous. As far as the images that I, you know, look back on and I think I could have tried harder, or maybe that didn't come off the way that I wanted, I feel like I learned a really valuable lesson very early on about what it means to truly release art into the world versus doing so in a more selfish way. Not that that's bad or should be looked down upon, because you know it's your art, but I remember putting an image out within the first 6 months of creating, and I didn't feel like it got enough comments on it. I was like, oh, nobody likes this, so I'm going to take it away. And I did, and I deleted that picture. And then my friend called me the next day and she said, what happened to that picture that I saw? I can't find it anymore. And I said, oh, nobody liked it, so I deleted it. And then she said to me, well, I actually had a miscarriage last week, and this is the first time that I felt truly connected to something again. And I just thought, who am I to take that away? You know, like I'm perceiving this in a certain way, like this image is a failure and somebody else needs to see it. So now my attitude about any old work is like, if I put it out there, maybe there's a reason for it. Maybe somebody needs that image, and it's not for me to say if they need it or not. So now I look at it all like whether that was a misfire or technically terrible or conceptually questionable, it's out. It's okay. So that's my attitude.
I love that, especially because, you know, even if there's something that's out there that isn't maybe perfect, I think it's wonderful not only for you to be able to go back and look and say like, oh, look at my growth, but I think it can be really inspiring for people who are, you know, really new to it to be like, oh, okay, well, this is what she did, you know, 10 years ago, and here's where she is now. So actually, if I do keep trying, it doesn't have to be, you know, I don't have to be at her level right now. Like I can still find.
That's my favorite thing. Like I have almost every image that I've ever made uploaded to Flickr, which was like a big photo sharing site. And it's in chronological order, and it's all there for the past 12 years, like everything that I've ever made. And I go back and look at that like every couple months, and I always have. And I look at it not from a critical point of like, oh, I was so bad back then, but from like a triumphant point of like, I wouldn't do it that way now. But like, look at that effort that I put in. And like, I remember waking up at 5 a.m. every day to do a photo shoot every day for a whole year. And like, that's pretty amazing.
So one of my favorite things about when I actually was able to see you work and see how you do it, you know, I always loved all of your work, but in my head I was like, okay, so she just takes these pieces and she's like, okay, here's this part of my face, and here's this, and then I'll take, and it's like, you know, just a collage kind of thing, and that almost all of it is probably done in front of her computer. And then when you came over to my house and did the actual, like, took my portraits, it was like, it's real. It's like, oh, no. There'll be a little bit, but yeah. So when Brooke came over and she was like, okay, well, where can we go? Where can we shoot? And I was like, well, there's this swamp. I mean, if you want to, because I thought like we'd go out and she'd take some pictures of the swamp and then, you know, Photoshop me. And she's like, no, you're going to be in the swamp. Yeah. Yeah. And she's like, you know, and let's get like, but just absolutely, we like carried this like 100-pound bird cage out into the swamp. You know, I'm crawling up trees. I don't have the other one is too it's too big, so I can't pick it up. But so this was, I don't know if this is even going to show up. Probably not. This is one of the pictures.
Oh, I love that you have that.
Right. And I have my antlers on.
Yeah.
And I would think, like, if I was looking at this photograph, I would be like, oh, okay, well, I bet she's sitting on a green screen, and but This was absolutely, first off, this like ripped up dress Brooke brought with her. It would not fit me, obviously, because I'm much larger. So it's like, it's just taped literally in the back. I have these antlers that are plastic antlers that she found in the garage, and she was like, let's use these. So I'm like, I'm hold up one side, and then she's like, okay, now put it down, and then hold up and she's like, okay, now I'm gonna take it with just the hair. Now I'm gonna, so like all of that, I really am on a log out in the swamp. You know, I mean, it's all real, and that's how you do your stuff too. It's not just like, oh, I found this background. I mean, right. You go out and do this.
Well, that's the joy of it, you know, like imagine if we had had our photo shoot and I said, okay, you don't have to leave your house. I'm just going to set up a background, pose like this, pose like that. Like, you know, 6 years later, 7 years later, however much time it's been, there's no way we'd be having this conversation, you know, but instead I was like, okay, Haley and Victor and Miley, get in the car and carry all this stuff for me, you know, and like, oh, and Jenny, wear all these silks on your body that are going to make you slip out of the tree that I've had you climb. Like, you know, it was ridiculous. And I have such vivid memories of it. But like, the truth is that like, I can flip open to like any image in this book, and I know exactly where I was and exactly what it felt like, you know, to be in every one of these places. Like I have this amazing physical memory from it. And you don't get that, I think, when you're constantly just posing in front of a backdrop. It's from, you know, knowing what it feels like to have all that equipment on your back and hiking out into the woods, sitting in the mud, slipping into the swamp, you know, all that stuff. It's like, I remember that. And that's the beauty of creating, isn't it? It's not like the click the button, oh, I made a picture. It's, I went out into the forest. I got to go to a swamp with Jenny Lawson and like make her fall out of a tree. And like, that's great. I mean, thank goodness you were not injured from any of this, but like, you know, that's the beauty of it.
It is truly capturing an experience, you know, both literally and physically. And, you know, one of the things that I really loved that I have picked up on with some of your stuff and one of your other books, and, you know, having the ability to see you work firsthand, are these wonderful, they're not tricks, but they're like tools that are just, they just seem so simple and end up with the most beautiful results. One of which was, let's see, you covered me in, I think it was baby powder.
Baby powder, yeah.
Yeah, and then I had like big handfuls of it, and you would just be like, okay, so you're gonna throw it in the air, and I was like, this is gonna look ridiculous. What are we doing? And I was just covered. It just looked, and I would throw it in the air, and so my friend Miley was there, and Victor were there, and my daughter was there. I mean, my child was there. Sorry, they are now non-binary, and I'm trying really hard to change the pronouns. And so they were all there, and they were all like, you look crazy. Like, you look nuts. And the pictures were so beautiful. The pictures looked like I was this specter, and there's this, you know, this smoke rising from me. And anybody looking at that picture would be like, wow, I wonder what Photoshop thing, you know, Brooke did to do that. And it wasn't, it was baby powder. So, so how do you come up with those? And are there other like fun tools that you've found that have made you go, oh, this makes a great photograph?
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because I think that so much of art is born out of necessity, whether it's like, I'm going to write a blog because I need to share about what I'm going through, or I'm going to take a picture because I need to express this. But for me, it was very much like, I have no money and I can't spend money on photography. So what can I do that costs me next to nothing, but still really impactful? And so for me, a lot of things like that came from that mindset of like, okay, my budget for the month is $10. What can I do with that? You know? And so it was very much like, okay, I'm going to just try everything. And I remember I started photography when I had a full-time job. And I would go into my work every day and just roam the offices. I was a receptionist. And I would just roam the offices and see what I could literally steal for the night to bring home to photograph, because I was like, I don't have money to buy a chair. I'm just going to take this chair and nobody will notice, you know? And so a lot of things like that started happening. Like some of my best hacks are, I didn't have money for costumes when I first started. So I just used a bed sheet for everything. I would just wrap myself in a bed sheet and it looked great. Like I have images where, and I wonder if I can just like flip to a page. Oh, I did. I flipped to a page where like, you know, this image is just a bed sheet that I'm using, you know, and like, I do that all the time. So stuff like that, I think it's just so valuable to have a box for your creativity and to say, okay, here are my constraints. And I really shouldn't be breaking out of them. Like, did I want to buy a $200 dress? Yes, I would have loved that, but that wasn't an option, you know? So it's like, okay, here's my box. I get this much money, this much time, you know, I have this many skills in Photoshop. What can I do with that? And so for me, all of my imagery was born out of that constraint of like, well, okay, what can I do in my 10-foot by 10-foot room, because I literally live in a box? What can I do with, you know, the $10 that I get? What can I do with, you know, the office that I'm working in? And like, what can I take home? And so my images for the first year were just bed sheets, stolen props from where I worked, and then substances. Like I would use baby powder and flour and chocolate sauce and like lots of weird things, you know, to create images with. But that's where it's born from. And I bet it's like that for everybody. You know, nobody starts with everything where you're like, I live in a mansion and I can do anything I want with any amount of resources. Nobody has that. It's unrealistic. So it's fun to explore that way.
That's awesome. So what inspires you, and what do you do when you don't have inspiration? Or maybe that doesn't ever happen to you, but I know I get points where I'm like, there'll be a full year where I'm like, nope, nothing. I've got nothing.
You know, that's such a great question, because I say this with a straight face, and I don't say this to brag, but I am never without inspiration, truly. Like there is never a dull moment in my brain where I'm like, I just don't know what to make. I always know something that I could be making. And it's, for me, it's more a matter of energy. Like, do I have the energy to get up today and go out into the forest with my camera and actually do this? And like the last 2 weeks, the answer's been no. I haven't done anything for 2 weeks that's been physical because I just haven't had the energy for it. But yeah, for me, the inspiration is always there. And I think that it's not always good inspiration. It's not always like the divine inspiration that gives you the best ideas, but there's always something to draw on. And I think that I think that it honestly comes from not really being a photographer so much as just being a really analytical, like deep diving human, because I'm constantly in my head. I'm constantly questioning what makes me me and what's interesting and where is my curiosity taking me right now. And so I think being super attuned to that part of yourself, you always have ideas that you just might, you know, get to the point where it's your taste is refined enough where you know if it's a good idea or a bad idea, or you know if it's worth your energy or if you need to conserve your energy. So for me, it's more about that. But my inspiration comes from analyzing myself and just being really honest about what I like. Like, you know, you, for example, you've got these amazing taxidermied creatures on the cover of your books, right? And people will look at that and be like, this is a weird individual, like something's up here, you know? And it's up to you to understand why you are that way. Like, why am I drawn to this? What's going on behind the scenes to make this happen? And I do the same thing. I'm like, you know, constantly inspired by death and grief, constantly. And so it's up to me to say, well, why am I like that? And that question of why, and then answering every day with a slightly deeper answer or a different answer, is nonstop inspiration for the rest of my life. Let's just hope I keep my energy up to keep making stuff for the rest of my life.
Is there anything that you like, an image that you haven't done yet because you feel like you don't have it in you quite yet? Is there anything that you're like, oh, I can't wait to do this one thing, but I need to be in a certain place, or I need to have more experience at something? Or do you just like, when it comes into your head, you're like, I'm just going to find the best way to do that?
Well, usually that's what I say. I'm usually like, I'm just going to make it happen, which like drives my perfectionist husband crazy, because he's like, no, find the right way to do it. And I'm like, no, find the quickest way to do it, you know? So I usually default to that. But I have 3 answers to this. Okay. So like the first answer is, I really want to photograph whales because I'm terrified of whales. So I really want to do that. And I don't know how yet, or like, you know, it's not the right time, but I will. And then my second answer is water related. I really want someone to build me a massive, like 8-foot square tank that's really ornate and beautiful, like a big fish tank that I can just put in different places and photograph people in the tank. That's like idea number 2. So Jenny, you're gonna model for me in the tank, okay? Okay, great. And then the third thing is actually a series that I'm working on right now that I'm traveling to my hometown to shoot. And it's, I became a foster mother a 1.5 years ago. So I've been thinking a lot about just the idea of how we love each other and how we perceive it, how we accept it into our lives. And specifically, I'm really interested in the idea of ownership and permanence through the lens of how we love. So like, you know, it's really easy for someone to love someone else if you own them. For example, like you have a child, that child is legally yours. You love them because they're yours, and for other reasons as well. Married, and now there's a piece of paper saying you own each other, essentially. And you know, I'm using crude language, but essentially. And so so my next series that I'm working on is all about ownership and permanence in our capacity to love and attach to things. So I'm very excited for that.
That is awesome. So that actually brings me up to my next question, which is, you know, you're a wife, you're a foster mother. Do you ever because I don't think that I've ever seen any of your photographs where you've used someone else, where you've been like, all right, husband, come stand in here and do, is that like, what's the reasoning on that?
Okay, so if I had it my way, he'd be in tons of photos, but he's just super private. So we just don't. And it's been very interesting. I'm very much someone who's like, if I think something, I'll say that thing. If I feel something, I'll tell someone. And so it's been a whole exercise, because I've been with my husband since I was 16. Like, we've done this thing together before art came along, you know? So for me, it's like, it's been a lesson in how do I create restraints for myself? Like, how do I hold stuff back so that it's precious to me? And if you had asked me 5 years ago, like, do you wish you could share everything? I would have said yes. And now I'm at the point where I'm like, I'm so glad that certain things are mine. It's like my little secret. So I find just a lot of joy in that. And then, you know, on the other side of that, I just don't like photographing people. Like, I just don't like it. So there's that other side of like, would I want to like put my husband in a photo? Theoretically, yes, but like in practice, I'd probably hate it. You know, like I'm a control freak. I want to do it my way. I want to do it fast, you know? So like, I don't know. It's kind of an interesting thing. I don't know.
Very interesting. So do you ever, because you are your primary, I don't want to say object, but you are, you know, are you ever like, oh, I really want to get my hair cut, but it's not going to look as good in the, you know, are you ever like, oh, I really want to get, you know, this tattoo, but then it'll show up in the.
Yes, all of those things. Like, what was so I hosted a conference 6-7 years ago, and I was on stage and I wanted to make a dramatic point. So about like letting go of things. And so I just picked up a pair of scissors and just chopped my hair off. And I was like, oh, dang, what did I just do? Like, what about my images? Like, I have to do the flowing hair because that's what people know. And then, and I've had that reaction too, where like, I had a whole tattoo designed that I wanted to get all over the back of my hand. And I was like, oh, that's going to be a pain to edit out. Like, I don't know if I should do that. And so though it's definitely a consideration, but I've learned the best lesson recently, which is there are things that you hold on to as a crutch. Like years ago, I thought I can never cut my hair because I'm known for this hair that I put in my images. But like, if that's the thing that I'm known for, then like, I'm not doing a very good job. Like if that's the thing that people are like, but the hair, then it's like, well, that's a problem because there are deeper concepts that I'm trying to get at here other than just here's some cool looking hair. So how can I let go of this safety net that I have for myself to go deeper and to bring people with me? And that has been really good. I haven't committed to the hand tattoo. Like, I feel like that's really going to be difficult to commit to, but I'm more willing to change now, which is good.
Well, you could do like the henna or the, what is it? Ink spot. I can't remember. Yeah, you can just
I will. I do. Like every time I went to a wedding in India a couple years ago, and I was like, give me all the henna. I just like need to feel like I have more tattoos. It was great.
That's awesome. Well, I will say when it comes to letting go of things, hello everyone, learn from me, because yesterday I went completely crazy and just thought maybe I should have bangs, because I'm at that level of pandemic insanity. And so I did. I cut them, and now I have bangs, and they look so awful. I look so ridiculous with bangs. And I actually took a picture of myself. As soon as I did, I took a picture of myself, and Victor looked at it and he was like, "What have you done?" And it was like, nothing. I did nothing. That was just a joke, not real. So if you're thinking about giving yourself bangs, don't do it.
I agree. I just did bangs 2 years ago, and it was really not the right choice. And I'm still like paying for it. They're still growing out. Like, it's not great.
It is so, like, my friend Laura, she has them, and she's just like, I don't need Botox. I get Bangtox. I just cover the, and I'm like, but your hair's so thick and gorgeous, and mine is just like, I just look like, it just looks awful. It looks bad. So yeah. Let's see. So we have questions in the Q&A. So I'm going to come over here. Some of them I may have, in some way, we may have discussed a little bit, but I think there's probably, in each one, there's probably a little extra that we can tease out. Let's see. So what was your main influence in creating this book?
Well, it was actually, I'm gonna tell the whole quick story of how this came to be, because I get asked a lot, like, about these types of things in terms of how do you get into a gallery? How do you get in front of a publisher, which more than anyone here about that. But I actually did a portfolio review 4 years ago now. And I was teaching at this event, and I went to the coordinator and I said, I know it's last minute, but can I just squeeze in to get my portfolio reviewed real quick? And so they let me slip in, and I didn't know any of the reviewers who were there. So I was just kind of going in blind, like, here's my portfolio. What do? And trying to figure it out. And I ended up sitting down in front of a book publisher who ended up publishing my book, which is G Editions. And she looked through my portfolio. She was the owner of the company. And she essentially just said, you have a lot here. I had shown her 30 prints, I think. And she said, do you have any more? And I was like, do I have more? I have hundreds more. And so I got out my phone, and we were looking at all the images. And she said, this is like a really, like a lot of work. Have you thought about putting a book together? And I said, nope, I haven't really thought about it. And she said, oh, well, I'm a publisher and we should do that. And so we started talking, and it took a couple of years to really get it together. But, over that time, the question was, what should be in this book? Because I've published over 900 images. So it's like, how many do you put in? What should it be? And then I kind of, as I looked back, I thought, my most meaningful work is my self-portrait work. And so that's where I settled on the theme of the book, just as far as like, what do I want to share? How should this be presented? And it was really to sum up 12 years of work. It was an exploration of myself, really, throughout the years, throughout the different themes that have come up in my life. And so that's why I settled on the title of reflection, exploration of self. It just felt really relevant to everything rather than just picking a period of my work, or like there was this body of work or that body of work. It was like the one constant is me, and it felt right.
Let's see. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. And do you have, oh, because that got dismissed. I was like, wait a minute, one of my questions went away. Never mind. So let's see. So how did you decide to put the photos together? Like specific order, theme, color, like what was that process?
It was, at first I really wanted to do it chronologically because I thought, well, that just makes sense. I've been doing this for this many years, but then when we started talking about it, I realized, like I mentioned, I have everything on Flickr. So like people can already see chronologically what my work looks like. And so I thought it would be so much more interesting to do it by chapter, by theme, because theme is like everything to me. I'll talk about theme for a million years and never die of boredom. Like I just love it. So I started to think about theme and how my work really fit into like, I could really narrow it down to like 10 themes and I've never really gone outside of those 10 different ideas. So we narrowed it down to, I think, 6. And so each chapter is a different one. So the first chapter is protection. And then it just gives a different lens for people to look at the work instead of just, this was taken in 2015 or something. It's like, this is all these images that come next somehow relate to this theme of protection. And I think that it gives anyone looking at it just a chance to go deeper into the work. Like that's what I was thinking about. Now everyone else can think about it too. So I thought that was pretty cool. As far as the order of the images, I'm really hopeless. I let the publisher do that. I mean, like I can't order images to save my life. I just don't have a design bone in my body. So
that is it's sort of surprising too, because in my mind, I'm like, people who are artistic can do everything artistically.
And I think that too. It's surprising to me. I'm like, I should be good at this. Like I start projects thinking I'll be great at this. I'm an artist. And then it's like, oh, this went south very quickly. Like, I don't know what I'm doing.
So do you have a favorite image in the book?
Oh my God.
What's your favorite child?
Yeah, it changes every day, like based on what I'm feeling. But there are certain, I'm just flipping through to try to find a couple of them. There are certain images that resonate very strongly with me, partially because of the memories associated with them, and then others more so because of the the idea behind it. But I'm just opening to one here that struck me as I just flipped past it. So like this one thematically is one of my favorites. Sorry, this camera's not really working out. Okay, there. So that's one of my favorites thematically, just because I just really resonated with every bit of symbolism in that picture. But then others, like I'm looking at this one, like I've always just been really kind of obsessed with this image because it represents like a turning point in my career where I made that image, and it was the first time that I had done anything really heavy-handed in Photoshop. I like had to cut out 1,000 different keys that I photographed and paste them in and make it look realistic. And so there are, images like that I look at in this book, and I'm just so transported. But as my final answer, and this is not one of my favorites in the book, but it represents kind of a favorite type of image to me, which is like, I just remember making this image so perfectly because I woke up at 4 a.m. and it was freezing cold, and I drove out to this lake, and it was still dark when I was setting up and like getting into the murky water to make this image. And there's so many images in here like that, where I can remember waking up while it was still dark and going through all this hassle and getting there and doing this thing, and how miserable it was to sit in that water and how frigid and just so cold. And those are all my favorite ones because it's like, I just feel that so deeply, like the adventure of it, the adventurous spirit. And I look at them and I'm inspired by my past self to keep, that spark alive. And that's just feels so good.
do you ever, I'm getting slightly off track here, but do you ever like get arrested for doing this stuff? Do people ever show up and go, hi, this is private property. What are you doing in a prom dress in my lake?
You know, I did have a very questionable police incident in Cambodia once, but we won't tell that story right now. Yeah, yeah. But you know, it really helps to be a relatively young, innocent looking person. Like I wear braids all the time. I'm like, better keep these in, you know, because when the police come, this is a good look, you know, like to look really innocent. So yes, I mean, I've been like, had talkings to in many different countries and in many different places, usually for trespassing, usually for like, you know, being halfway over hopping a fence. And then people are like, you can't do that. You can't jump this fence, you know? So yeah, it happens. I've been like banned from a couple of parks, and not for any indecency, just, you know, just like, I don't know, people don't like when you take pictures places. So yes.
That is fantastic. I love the idea of you being banned from parks. And I love the idea that there were probably people that were like, that lady out there just like hanging out in the river. That lady's just hanging out in the river. And okay, what's going on? I just love the idea of people being like, did I just see some sort of like a sea creature? What's happening? Is that person insane?
Oh my gosh, it's my favorite thing. Like I have this little pond kind of near my house, but it's right by a road. Anytime I shoot there, people drive super slow and like they always yell stuff at me. And I never really know what they're saying. Like sometimes it's like, what are you doing? But then they keep driving. So I'm like, do you want me to answer you? Like, you know, I don't know what's happening. Sometimes people look angry about it. Like just like, they're just like staring really intensely. That maybe that's just their face. I don't know. And then
how dare you be art?
right, it's really crazy. But the one of the funniest times that I remember getting caught for something where I was like, I very knowingly was shooting where I wasn't supposed to, but I thought I could do it quick and like on the down low. It was at Paramount Ranch, which is like, it's burned down now actually, but it was like a big ranch set, like Old West set for Hollywood. And I was shooting there really fast, and somebody, park ranger, caught me doing this, and he was like, you're not allowed to be here, you should know the rules, you have to have a permit. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know, I'm gonna go right now. And he ended up kind of like following up with me, and he was like, I'm gonna go home and look you up, and if I see that you're a professional photographer, you're getting a fine in the mail. And so I called my husband and I was like, take my website down right now, oh my god, they're gonna find me. And so he like shut everything down, and for I think like 48 hours I had no presence. I was like, oh, I hope he doesn't find me, and he didn't, so it was okay.
It's a great story. Oh, this is a really good question. How do you create the upward movement of objects from the bodies, like the butterflies from the back?
It's all, for me, it's just about thinking about how would this naturally occur and then trying to make that occur as much as possible. And this is what I think a lot of people will overlook, is just what looks realistic and what doesn't. It's really easy when you're doing something in Photoshop, like let's say you've got this butterfly and you only have one butterfly that you're just like cutting out and pasting in a bunch of times. You know, it's so important to think about changing the angle of that butterfly and thinking about like flow and movement in an image. And so where do I want the eye to go? How do I want the eye to move through the picture? And so for me, it's really about that. It's about creating natural motion, even when there is none. You know, like there wasn't really a butterfly or like 100 butterflies flying out of my back. But I think to myself, well, if there were, how would it look? You know, if there were like 100 butterflies stuffed in my body right now, and I ripped open a seam in my back and they all came flying out, you know, they'd be really thick at my back and they'd get more dispersed and they'd probably go like this in shape. And so I just think about it like that, like just use your imagination and say, what would this really look like if it could happen? And then try to recreate that.
Love it. Let's see. So while not autobiographical, are these images, do they come from your dreams?
They come from my curiosity more than my dreams. It's so funny. I have nightmares every night. And like, if I took pictures of my actual dreams and stuff, it would just be like somebody murdering me all the time. Like, that's what I dream about for whatever reason. So, that's, not great, but, so yeah, so it's not so much that as it is, like I sit down and I think, what in my mind is the most enduringly beautiful, interesting thing in the world? And to me, that's where these themes come up, like the themes that my book is split into, the themes that I continuously explore. It's not my dreams, it's not, even like what I think about while I'm doing the dishes. It's like the deeper level of how am I connected to this world? And that's where it comes from.
That is fascinating. But it's interesting too, jumping off of that question, because I know I do this thing, and I think it really says something about me, using my phone too much. But I have, in my dreams, at least 2 or 3 times a week, something will happen in my dreams, and I'll be like, I have got to get a picture of that. What the hell is that? And I'll wake up and I'll be like, oh, I got to share that picture. Wait, that doesn't exist. That just happened. Are you ever like in your dreams, you like come up with the perfect thing and then you do it and then you wake up and you're like, that doesn't exist. I did all that work.
No, but I really admire you. I mean, I'm telling you, my dreams consist solely of me running from people who are trying to murder me. Like, that's like it. So, no, but like, I think that's wonderful. Maybe tonight I'll be like, oh, I got to get my phone out, take a picture of that murderer, maybe, but I highly doubt it. I'm really jealous of your dreams though.
I never get to see the people who are chasing. I always know something's chasing me, but I can't move fast. And so what I have learned in my dreams, which is it's made such a difference, because before I would just be running in quicksand, and then I would die and I would wake up as I was dying. And now I've realized in my dream, I can hold on to things and pull myself. And so, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think I'm just extending those nightmares. Don't do that. Don't do that.
I don't know. I think maybe you should. I think there's something to that. Like, you're getting control over your nightmares. That's it.
Exactly. I should just turn around. Victor always says, he's always like, that's how you can tell the difference between different people. He was like, I have never run away in my dream. I turn around, I'm going to kill whatever it is that comes after me. And I was like, that's the difference between us. Let's see. Okay, here's a good question. Have you ever created an image with an intention, but then after a while, maybe years later, you see that picture and have a completely different experience with it?
Yes, definitely. That happens a lot. And it's not that necessarily the original intention is gone. It's just that I've had different experiences, so I see things in different ways. And I have my book open to the perfect spot for this. So this image is one that I created 3 years ago, I think. And I made this image as like going after your dreams. A very kind of obvious concept there. But now I look at it and I think about my foster kids, who are no longer with me, but I think about them now in this image. Like, are they going to be able to go after their dreams? Which isn't like a total concept shift, but it's just putting different experiences into it when you see it. So that happens to me a lot from that perspective of like, now I met this person, now I've done this thing, and now I see this very differently. But not as far as regretting something or doing it differently so much, just really just seeing other people in the images.
That's interesting, especially because that image, when I look at it, to me, it's sort of a sad image, because I look at it and I'm like, you are so terrestrial. You're like, I'm trying as hard as I can, and I'm going to stand on this little stump to touch a star, and I'm like, that's not going to happen. It doesn't help at all. So it is very interesting how
that is so funny to me, because again, this is one of my happiest pictures that I've ever made. Like, I swear, I look at this and I'm like, oh, she's trying so hard and she's gonna get it, and you're like, she has no chance.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, poor her. I mean, there is hope to it. I mean, definitely I look at it and I'm like, I love that she still has the hope, but we all know she's not making it. Like eventually, like that's like the hope of, and then you realize like, oh yeah, not all your dreams are going to come true.
Wow. That really took it to a dark place. And I have a fundamental disagreement about the way that you view this image. But as we talked about, every opinion is valid.
Exactly. This is a really, really good question. Which online community brings you the most joy?
Oh my God, that's not possible to answer.
Right?
It's because there's no distinction to me. That's the thing, is like anybody who's willing to talk to me is like a great option. And I really believe that. Like, I really don't see any differences across the platforms very much. And I have certain soft spots for like, my Flickr community from 10 years ago and stuff like that. But I don't know. I just think I'm just obsessed with community everywhere. So it's like, I don't care if you write to me on Instagram or email me or, find me on the street somewhere. It's like, I'm just so happy that anybody cares, which I think is probably from, like an adolescence where you feel invisible and like, what am I ever going to do to contribute anything to the world? And then all of a sudden someone's there to say, hey, you did do something, you did contribute something, let's talk about it. And it's like, how am I that lucky, to be an artist living in an age where you can make something and then people talk to you about it, like that wasn't always the case for a lot of artists. And it's like, I never take that for granted. I think it's gorgeous.
Yes. Yeah. And you have a great community. Like I always love, I always dip into your like Instagram comments, just because I love not only like the community is so fantastic, but also that there's so much back and forth with the different people saying like, oh, well, I thought this, well, I thought that, right? Instead of it's not just like everybody going fire, fire, fire. It's like it's real people and they're really talking. And even if they're talking about something, they're like, well, I didn't really like this, or I don't think this is okay, or it's still done with like kindness and interest.
Always. It's like once every few years that I get a really mean comment, and like really rare. And that's so cool, and I watch people who put their stuff out there and like there are just nasty comments flying everywhere about every little thing. And I am just so grateful that there's a space that we can talk about art and not get angry with other people about it and just have our feelings and feel them and then walk away. It's so good.
This is a good question. So you talked about shooting in the woods and in swamps. What is the most extreme thing you have ever done or extreme place that you've ever gone to capture a photograph?
Interesting. I have a couple of answers to this. And there are other answers that like I don't think are extreme, but probably other people wouldn't do. But probably the most extreme, I just shared this image on my Instagram the other day, was that I went to Iceland and I knew that I wanted to get in the water in Iceland. I was like, this is the thing that I'm gonna do, because everybody was going to Iceland to take pictures at the time, and I was like, I'm gonna be different. So I decided to go in the water at midnight in Iceland when there was like still a little bit of sun and it was so cold. And that's probably the most extreme thing. Although the more extreme you make it, the more of like a heightened flow state you get in, I think. So I do stuff like that and like everything falls away. So I'm not thinking about the cold. I'm not thinking about whatever creatures are in that water and stuff like that. It's like, I'm just there doing my thing until, all of a sudden I realize I'm going to get hypothermia and I should get out of the water. But that's always how it is. So like for me, like I get the most uncomfortable in water. I'm like kind of afraid of water and stuff. And I'm kind of a baby when it comes to the cold. So those are always my worst. But then like I was thinking about how this just popped into my head. I was teaching like kind of a workshop in Thailand, and I was trying to demonstrate to a bunch of teenagers, like, you just have to go for it with your art. And they're like, they've never held a camera. They're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, you got to just commit. And I was like, look, I'm going to do a self-portrait. And I went and I laid down in a bunch of elephant poop. And I was like, you just got to commit to your art. And they were like, no, like that, you're disgusting. And I have this picture of me laying in like this bunch of poo with like chains wrapped around my arm. And I was like, I'm making a point. And everyone was just like, no, you're not.
That's fantastic. This is why we're friends. Oh my God, I would totally do that after a lot of drinks. Wouldn't even need to have a camera. That is so fantastic. I cannot believe it's already 7. So, oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who came. Thank you to you, Brooke. This was so much fun. I had such a good time. I'm loving this book, and I am going to continue to go through it because every time I find something that's a little different that I'm like, oh, what do I think about this one? As a matter of fact, I'm going to take this up and show it to my child, is to be like, well, what does this mean to you? Because I actually think this would be a really good sort of talking point book for somebody that you're trying to get to know, or for your children, or even your parents. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, this was so much fun. Do another one really quick so that we can do another one of these soon.
I agree.
Love everybody. If you have any questions on using the coupon, like I said, just email orders@nowherebookshop.com. And thank you, Brooke, and thank you, Elizabeth, for hosting this, and thank you to everybody. Y'all are the best. Bye.